We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, March 14th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode a day after the Chicago White Sox traded Dylan Cease to the San Diego Padres. We'll discuss what's left of the White Sox pitching staff with Cease gone, who is going to be part of the starting rotation, and why Nick Nastrini deserves a chance. Plus, how moving Cease impacts Pedro Grifol and the tough job that gets tougher for him. But first, Chicago White Sox GM Chris Getz met with the media on Thursday, and our James Fegan was able to join.
Today we look forward, or we already have, welcoming some new players to our organization. Obviously the trade yesterday with Dylan Cease going to the Padres is a significant one for our organization, for us. What went into that decision-making, for one, going back to, early September, or when I was named to being the general manager here, we were very intentional in, establishing what our decision-making process was going to be. And I was very open about finding opportunities to find ways to upgrade our organization, upgrade our roster, and that we would consider anyone on our major league roster if we felt like there was a move that would improve our team or better our organization, both short-term and the long-term. We applied that in a trade with the San Diego with Dylan Cease, along with with any other moves that we've made this offseason. So we're very excited about bringing in this new group of talent. Drew Thorpe, he's a player that came over in the Juan Soto trade to San Diego from New York, and to be able to get the opportunity to bring him into the White Sox organization is very exciting. Very polished right-handed starter, an elite changeup, and he's got strong pitchability. He's performed throughout his minor league career, and he has been nothing short of excellent in spring training. We feel like he's going to be part of our starting rotation for years to come. In addition to Drew Thorpe, Jairo Iriarte, another right-handed starter. He's pitched up to Double-A. Very unique arsenal, power fastball, slider, bowling ball type fastball, and just a chance to be a really impactful major league player. In addition to that, we brought in a major league reliever presently in Wilson. He is a guy that can plug right into our bullpen. I feel like he can be an effective reliever for us, and excited to have him part of this package. And then Zavala a high ceiling, potentially impactful center fielder that was 18 years old and was productive in low A with San Diego and will be joining our organization. But we feel like it's a very good haul of talent, both that can impact our major league club, right out of the gate, and then plenty of opportunities within this deal to really get some impactful players throughout the complete deal. So it's a little bittersweet having Dylan Cease out the door. He's a kid that he was a kid when we acquired him, and to watch him grow up both as a person and as a player has been certainly a joy for myself and the organization. But this certainly we felt like it was the right time to make this move to better our organization moving forward.
I think you talked about, Vinny already asked about what drove you to make this deal now, but are you surprised to make a deal like this? I think deals of this magnitude or size are rare to happen mid-spring training. You probably think of them more as off-season or deadline. What dynamics do you think were in place to get the market, just drive offers up to where you were comfortable with it, as opposed to waiting at the deadline where maybe you see teams kind of up the ante because of the responding to the need a bit more?
Yeah, I can't say that there was a blueprint that was being worked off of. I mean, okay, what needed to be met for us to move on this, and what drove that? A lot of different factors. I'm sure free agency played a part with some of these other teams that really jumped in and got motivated. And also, quite honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with Dylan coming out here and showing everyone what the pitcher that he is. He's been really sharp early on, and it's certainly been out there. Last year wasn't Dylan's best year, and there was I think a level of concern that perhaps he wasn't going to be able to get back to who who he's been in the past, and I had all the faith in the world based on how comfortable I am with Dylan Cease, his work ethic, and the talent that he is. And so I think that other teams' comfort levels were raised when they were able to see it in person. Obviously, they don't know the player like we do. It was kind of a perfect storm. There's the $1 million question of, okay, if you take this into the season, take it towards the deadline, what type of a does that look like? Well, that's a risk. Were we willing to take that? Of course we were. I was willing to take it into the season. However, there's no denying that a lot of things can happen on a baseball field and throughout a season. So you weigh that risk with the offer that was given to us by San Diego, and we felt like that was something that was likely not to be met if we would have taken into the season. And we had a highly motivated team in the San Diego Padres that wanted to start the year out with Dylan Cease, and I understood that. It made sense for both sides. I'm sure it's a deal that's going to help San Diego Padres, and very confident that it's a deal that's going to help the Chicago White Sox.
Alongside that, with it occurring at this point in the year, do you feel like you have to go out and acquire some innings to replace what you were prepared for Dylan to provide at the start of the year?
That's certainly a valid question, and I have been excited about the performance so far in spring training with some of these arms. You've got Nick Nastrini, who's performed really well. You've got Garrett Crochet that's pitching today and has performed excellently as he stretches out to be a potential starter for us. You look at Eric Fetty, who was effective yesterday, and Soroka, who's also throwing today. Flexen's pitched well. We've got some NRIs that we've brought in this offseason that have showed the ability to throw multiple innings. So we actually feel pretty good about where we're at in regards to being able to cover these innings effectively. However, there are some different ways that we could go about it to certainly make us more confident or improve our roster further. And we're going to sit down. We've got some time before opening day to really assess where we're at, and if there's an opportunity to improve our status going in, we're going to do so. Yeah, so Michael is going to be transitioning to the bullpen. We've made that decision. We've talked to Michael, and his next outing is going to be out of the bullpen. So that he's a very talented arm, as we all know. And he's going to have ability to get outs towards the back half of the game. I can't say that everyone and our pitching staff has the ability to get outs like Michael does. So we look forward to seeing what that looks like. But yeah, we've made the decision that he's going to be going to the bullpen.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
If you only have a 401k, you're not getting the most for retirement.
Wait, what?
Add a Robinhood IRA on top, then they'll boost it by 3%.
You can do that?
And if you transfer in any retirement account, you get 3% on top of that.
Is there a limit to the match?
No limit. Robinhood Gold gets you the biggest contribution match of any IRA on the market. Sign up for Robinhood Gold at Robinhood.com/boost by April 30th. Subscription fees apply.
Investing involves risk. 3% match requires gold for 1 year from first match. Must keep IRA for 5 years. Match on transfers subject to additional terms and conditions. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC.
Joining me now is Sox Machine's beat reporter, James Fegan, and the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. Gents, hello again. James, we just heard you in the media conference for Chris Getz. After that call, do you have a better sense of what direction the Chicago White Sox are taking post Dylan Cease?
They're going to be bad, ladies and gentlemen. I think even just the fact that like it was a given that they were going to trade Cease, and I think just talking more privately from around camp with team personnel, like the expectation was that they were going to be down this year, and ideally not be down they didn't want to intentionally be down for 3 years with kind of no real plan or direction to get out, or kind of maybe uncertain plan to get out the way that things wound up shaking out with the last rebuild. But certainly in terms of like this year, they wanted to, I think they're trying to set themselves up for seeing, there's an emphasis on near-term talent for guys like AA higher. The big emphasis that Getz had today was talking about that, how many of these guys you could see this year, and putting Jairo Iriarte in that same bucket along with Drew Thorpe, you could much more easily, just on the strength of command, see pitching this year. And the big touting of like, hey, we're going to have 3 guys, we're going to have a lot of innings adding to the season, and trying to mitigate a little bit the blow of losing Cease that kind of makes them obviously less competitive, and really, seemingly takes the pie in the sky scenario of how they even get to like 70 wins, make it a lot more fraught. But I think they're trying to emphasize that their direction is trying to have a really good idea, or have it a bit more visible, of how they be good, or who's going to be part of the core when they be good, in place or just near term by the end of the season. But I think the seeds were kind of sown a little bit before this trade pulled off. This kind of just, one, put some urgency behind it, but also maybe showed that they obviously weren't as comfortable taking Cease into the season, and then incurring some of the risks that would take, as maybe they're letting on. In turn, that probably takes a little bit of the air out of the sails of like, hey, maybe they might be okay for a little bit starting off, because if their run prevention really is going, that can make them a viable team. Whereas this is like, hey, here's what the season's about, guys, in case you're getting any weird ideas.
Yeah, I thought Pedro Grifol's, like, the way his tone changed when the reality of Cease being traded became rather evident. Like, he was like 0.0 for Pacoto. We'll show them to, I don't know if he's being traded. I don't know what our opening day is. Why are you asking me? Like, all of a sudden, like, there seemed to be like a it read like panic. I doubt it was panic, but it read like it. But it more just perturbed, and I wonder where he's going to go for motivation, because like last year he was trying to deny after the trade deadline that it was about development, and then like he had to eat those words pretty quickly when he made a slow hook choice, which would have been defensible if the season were about development, but it lost him the game, and he had to kind of backtrack on that. So given that he's really tried to use like respectable, if not contention, at least like being a real professional outfits, like I'm curious where he's going to go rhetorically.
It went from like, it's up to us to determine how competitive we can be, to like, it's beyond man's grasp to understand our fate. That's thought by powers above. Like, there is a shift.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big shift. And to your point, Jim, like with Pedro Grifol, not many managers in Major League Baseball survive having back-to-back 100-loss seasons, especially if the team on the field looks disjointed, like they can't do anything right. And losing Dylan Cease, what James said at the beginning part of this segment, that the White Sox are going to be bad in 2004. They're going to be especially bad without Dylan Cease to start the season. Like the White Sox in the opening series of this season, Jim, face the Detroit Tigers. Now, offensively, not that scary of a team. The second series is against the Atlanta Braves, and that's where it can get ugly. And it could remind me of last year's opening home series against the San Francisco Giants. Not a very good offense for the Giants, but what do they put up? Like 30 plus runs in 3 games against the White Sox. That's where it could get ugly real fast now without the White Sox having Dylan Cease to make 2 of those starts in the first 6 games of the year.
It reminds me of 2017 when they carried Jose Quintana into the season, and they were okay in the first half. And then we've talked about it before. They traded him, and then that just took all the air out, like all of the pretense of being like a, second division team, but nonetheless one that actually has, real major league run preventers in the rotation. There might be a little bit of name brand pitching up top with, Soroka being there. He might be somebody who's had at least some success to where like he, maybe the team can rally around him a bit, but that's kind of how it struck me, is just once Quintana went, the team took a pretty quick nosedive, and then they probably would have been like 105, 110 loss bad if that team lacked Quintana and Frazier the whole year. It's just hard to see where runs are going to come from. Hard to see like how this defense first approach is going to hold up. Like if they have lost 4 games in a row and they're winning 3-2, and they have to cut down a run at the plate, or feel like they have to play the infield in the 5th inning because runs are hard to come by. Like that's, I think, you can talk about playing crisp defense all you want, but I think as losses pile up, and that's the way you're trying to win, like that's the way people try to, the saying, do too much. That's when that comes in, and people who normally don't make mistakes make mistakes. So that's one thing I'm watching for when the season starts, is just like, they should play better defense, but will that defense feel compelled to make the same mistakes they've made, just maybe in a more talented fashion?
And James, to you, like on the point of Pedro Grifol, like moving forward, because this week, I mean, he hasn't looked great any week, but this week he especially doesn't look great, because when he was asked about if Dylan Cease was still the opening day starter, he was very flustered, and he at least showed to me he's an awful liar. He knew something was clearly up, that Dylan Cease could be on the move. Cease even admitted that he spoke to Chris Getz, and we heard from the beginning part of spring training that as soon as Cease heard from Getz that he would know that something was going to be on the horizon, and voila, he gets traded. yesterday on Wednesday to the San Diego Padres. So like moving forward, clearly in this press conference, Chris Getz mentioned, because he was asked, is it other moves coming? And I think people are alluding to Luis Robert, and Chris Getz is leaving that door open that, yeah, he's willing to talk about anyone on this organization to help make this team better long-term. Do you have any insight, or can you speculate on the idea of like Pedro Grifol, with him not being part of the decision-making? Are we just going to get this flustered Pedro Grifol for the first couple months of the season where it looks like that they are panicking on the bench for the Chicago White Sox?
I mean, I imagine he'll pivot pretty soon to, how they have depth, or how they are looking forward to some of these guys helping him out. I just think at the moment, I think bad liar may be the right designation for it, of just like everyone kind of knew that something was coming, and kind of a party line about it wasn't really formed out. I think, during the second half of last season, I think the thing we got a lot was like a really quiet Grifol who just had nothing to say. And, made this practice that was entirely unprompted, where he would just come post game and just start detailing the game a bit. And I feel like every manager will wind up giving a little play-by-play a bit at times, especially after losses, where they're just kind of like trying to explain how we got to this point. But he would just do it automated every day. Second half of the season, it got a lot more. Not much to say about that one. What are the questions? And so I think he would get. I think like if things go downhill, or if there's just like in this weird situation where they're getting hammered in the first half and you're not even seeing like, you're a typical like 8-4 loss, but in September, but Drew Thorpe went 5 innings, 3 runs, and there's a lot to break down. But if they have a lot of veteran groups, they have a lot of veteran position players, and you're really not seeing kind of the fruits of what their futures are looking like, I think you're going to get a lot of quiet, not much to say about this team, and there's really nothing to like point to as like what the interest and what they're working on, which I think will probably get difficult to handle, because they're trying to distinguish like where they're at, or what their identity is, or what they're banking on going forward. So I think you're going to get more like quiet and not really engaging Grifol than like a panicked one. I think this is kind of a specific situation with just not a great performance in trying to run interference.
Maybe this is finally the environment where we can see the Pedro Grifol charm offensive.
I mean,
most I'm trying to just picture what that would look like. Yeah. But just, raconteur, telling stories, spinning yarns. It doesn't really seem like it's him. Like, I always compare, now that Terry Francona is out of the division, like I'm not sure if maybe Baldelli's okay at Hinch, but I always admire like Francona's ability just to like come up with stories, mostly self-deprecating, just to like kill time. Something dumb that happened to him that day, just to like make reporters, have something to tweet that was just about him. Like, it really seems like Grifol really could use that gear right now, of just like, hey, here's a weird thing. I got a parking ticket because I don't know how to read signs. Ha ha ha. What's the question? But instead of just, doesn't connect with people that way.
I've certainly seen that side of him. It's just, you don't see a lot on record in a way where those guys seem to be at ease even when reporters are running at them. I think it kind of blends into like a lot of the answers about Moncada, where he's oversteering and trying to like positively affirm and talk him up to where it starts talking about like you're no longer, you're off the road a little bit to the other side. Like it doesn't feel like you're talking about what we're seeing or what your goals should be. It just seems like you've committed so hard to this angle of trying to encourage or this player and activity and energy from him, that now you're talking about things that you don't even agree with strategy wise. I mean, I've heard Grifol talk about situations with the hard to line up in the game on the line, where he says like, the last thing I want to do is overmanage and take the bat out of people's hands. Like that kind of confidence is in him. He gets kind of wrapped up when he's trying to rally the troops who aren't in the room at times.
The whole part about being quiet, though, at the beginning part of the season, Jim, like this is going to differ. And you are on 6 of the score. You are Dan Bernstein and Mark Grody this week, and the Bears didn't have breaking news, so they didn't cut you off like they did James earlier in the week on Monday when who did the Bears sign that suddenly
Yeah, DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, okay, that's right, DeAndre Swift.
I was spiraling. They got me out of there. I don't know.
But you were on that show, Jim, and like Dan Bernstein asked you this question of like, what is there to watch now for the 2024 White Sox? And it is a good question. That is something that we at Sox Machine are going to be focusing and try to provide you guys reasons to continue watching and visiting the site every single day and try to be invested as much as possible of a team that we think is not going to be very good in 2024. But if you have Pedro Grifol, if he gets into quiet mode and it's like April 20th, it's going to start raising the question and be complete opposite of the experience that we had with Rick Renteria during the White Sox rebuild, where it seems like he was in tune with the front office. He knew what the task was on hand, and he was bringing as much positive energy as possible, even to the media. And maybe James could speak a little bit more about that, being there and interviewing Renteria. But if we get Hawk Harrelson version of Pedro Grifol in April, because this team stumbles out of the blocks, then I guess the next big move on Chris Getz's plate after trading Dylan Cease is what is he going to do at manager? Because I cannot foresee Pedro Grifol sticking around very long if things get ugly and he just doesn't look like he's up to the task of steering the ship back into its lane.
Yeah, I think it might have like the feeling of a ghost ship if it's, they're, same record as last year, 721, except like last year it was actually, it was important that they were that bad. Like it signified something. It signified something bad, but just it drew attention. Answers needed to happen. He needed to come up with something. Like it was very crucial that these flaws were being discussed, whether they could be addressed. And that was one of his cliches was we'll address it, and nothing was ever addressed. But like there was they had to talk about it. And so like, he didn't have the option of silence. He might've wanted to be silent, but he had to show that like, I'm doing whatever I can, I'm hitting all of the buttons on the dashboard here. The core is still melting down, but let it be known if there's massive fallout, I did everything I could. Whereas this time around, like if the team's going to be this bad, that's why I'm wondering, like, what kind of mode does he have just to stay engaged when everything could be pointing to just, we're punting the season. Because if he knows like internally, intrinsically that I'm not going to be the guy for this team and I can't ever see getting hired as a manager again, which I think is pretty likely the way it's going. Just there is probably some existential push and pull within him, and just in terms of like, how do I go about framing this? Do I distance myself? Do I wrap my arms around it? How much do I steer or just take my hands off the wheel and leave it to the gods? And when it came to Renteria, like he was hired to manage a bad team, whereas Grifol wasn't. So I think that's the difference there. And so like Renteria wasn't responsible for, certainly after the trade deadline in 2017, just like the turn it took. But I am curious, like in 2018, that was probably the Renteria mode when they did lose 100 games. Just how, I guess, James, how did he handle like the bad periods where there wasn't much to say and like silence could have been an option?
I think it was like so geared towards, it was such a known quantity and like admitted what they were, that it was very easy for him to kind of harp on individual things or individual players or like even like I think there was probably some story in 2018 where we're writing about like Lurie Garcia bunting, and he was saying like, I want him to basically have that tool or have that ability in his toolkit for some other season where we're playing a game that matters and he has to. And we're kind of like, all right, maybe. I mean, this game certainly doesn't matter, so screw it. We don't have to run optimize like this series in Cleveland in July. Like, I guess that's a decent explanation. It was kind of hard to imagine that he was really going to pull back on it, like when the season mattered. But like there was such a luxury that he got to operate in terms of like we're so clearly focused on development. You talk to my boss twice a month, where he gives like the little like we've given him a knife to go to a gunfight speech, and like there's not like this pressure of like why does your team look like crap now. Something that Ricky had to his credit was that his teams, especially the rebuilding teams, like they were kind of like untalented pain in the asses. Where like, yeah, I remember doing that story. I want to say it was like maybe 2019 or 2020, which is like, what's the characteristic of a Rick Renteria team, and asking the other managers in the division. And he's like, those guys run hard, like they play hard. They're clearly all fighting for their lives, and he's got them motivating. He's got a culture. You could say that dissipated a little bit in 2020, and it's kind of ironic that he's kind of the benchmark for being in line with the front office when, probably internally there was a bit more of him pushing to them to like put the foot on the gas and, push prospects up and give him a chance to develop them like in the major leagues. Like his kind of argument was like, if that's what I'm doing at the major league level, like give me the guys that matter. A bit, and there was obviously contention about them not pushing forward at the 2020 deadline, but he was very protective of like not deviating from that. Even like, I don't think he ever commented to any of us publicly. Like I think probably, I know me and Daryl all both reached out to him like after he got fired, and he was just like, I'm not gonna like, badmouth this relationship, or I'm not gonna go on the record and even say that much. But he was very good at like kind of towing the line, almost like it came off a little bit of scared of his shadow to a degree, but I still think he was probably better at presenting energy and presenting like kind of purpose and enthusiasm about what they're facing on a day-to-day basis than Grifol has shown. But I don't know how much. Sure, Ricky has a more energetic and pump beat kind of like bedside nature, but there's also just a clarity of purpose that he was in lockstep with, of like, hey, we're trying to show developmental strides. We're trying to have a culture. The results are going to pile up against us, but we're going to deal with it. Whereas Grifol was like brought into this situation where he's supposed to win, produce one of the worst teams in franchise history, and now is seemingly without this clear pivot of, hey, we're going to take our lumps and it's just the way it is. But now having a team where he's trying to explain why it could be better or it's going to be different than it was, when it seems like this team is kind of exists to just get through the season and get to when they'll be good again. And, how much does Grifol's role just to take his lumps and get through the season before they can set up somebody that they actually want to guide this next good team and have a cleaner slate than not have to deal with the 2024 White Sox?
I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like, maybe he sees the writing on the wall already and the season hasn't even started, Jim. Like, all right, you just traded the best pitcher that we have away. And I was really hoping that I could motivate these guys to win 10 more games than we did last year, 2024, to show that, I can do this job. I can manage. Like, for Chris Getz, like, his job gets a little easier, I say, after the Dylan Cease trade. It's off his shoulders. It's off the plate. That task has been completed. Now he can focus on how to continue to add more players. You got the MLB draft coming up in July. That's another opportunity for the White Sox to add at least the position players, they love pitchers. They can add more pitchers into the farm system. But for Pedro Grifol, overall, his job was already tough coming to this year. He was trying to toe the company line, Jim, try to give reasons why they could contend. Nobody bought it then. Nobody's buying it now. And I'm not even sure Pedro Grifol buys what he is publicly saying. That's maybe why he's so flustered.
Yeah, and I think, thinking back to that 2018 season, that was the year that I think Renteria got like a little bit tangled up in over-policing hustle and like making too much of eyewash, and ran the risk of like maybe like getting on the wrong side of his players. I think he pulled back once 2019 arrived and they're back to being the entertaining, slightly underpowered, or at least you have a lopsided roster, but had some games where they could, they could win series, could go on a little bit of a roll, had some prospects coming up to inject some excitement. So he was able to pull out of that mode and save his job for a little bit. Whereas Grifol seems like, he already had, I think, some of the reputation last year of over policing some guys and then not policing anybody. So I think there's already this divide a little bit of just how much can we trust this guy? And now it's a case of like, now they're giving him even less and undermining the platform he was using to try to motivate the whole team. So it does seem like he's a little bit of a meat shield to just take these losses in the first half. And then, Getz will figure out a guy he wants for the job later. It's unfortunate, but also like Grifol did a lot himself with just the way he was, he was not the right guy for the job last year. I mean, maybe that's Rick Hahn's fault, and Grifol is just somebody who, won the interview rounds, and then that was the only thing he won. But yeah, it's a tough road ahead, and it's probably, the decision for Getz to stick with Grifol, while unpopular, and it's doesn't necessarily reflect well when he's saying like, yeah, he's our guy, when really there's nothing pointing to that. But like, if it's a case of like, this first half is going to be grisly, I don't want my handpicked manager to absorb all these losses and accumulate baggage, because that's what happened with Renteria. Every rebuilding manager gets that, where just the losses get old, and they front office gets tired of them, the manager gets tired of them. Like in the case of Renteria, Renteria didn't like having losses put on his tab because they weren't giving him the best roster they possibly could. So that's why I think like it makes sense to have Grifol just like as a sponge, basically, to just sop up the bad stuff, and then against all odds, maybe he flips a switch and finds this nothing to lose mode, and all of a sudden shows why Hahn hired him in the first place. But if the precedents hold, then my guess is like they just need somebody fungible to get through the darkest part, and then when you start seeing some daylight, they'll have somebody, maybe a Renteria type, who can actually take on the job of having a clean slate and being able to shepherd this group. And maybe the White Sox front office is a little bit more aggressive about supplementing that young core faster, or at least, calling guys up faster, trying to make games meaningful faster.
So Pedro Grifol's in a tough spot. He was already in a tough spot. It got much tougher for him. Not looking great. And he's not sounding great this week when speaking to the media. We'll see how things change as we get closer to opening day. And even on opening day, as James will be there for us covering the home White Sox games, we'll also be sending him out on the road. Thank you guys, as always, for your continued support on patreon.com/Sox Machine. All right, so let's talk about what the White Sox are doing as we got more information, trying to rebuild this starting rotation now that Dylan Cease is not here. Ethan Katz, the White Sox pitching coach, told media members that were in Glendale today that there's 10 internal candidates for 5 spots in the starting rotation. Okay, I don't know if I exactly buy that, but the big news, James, later in that press conference, when asked about Michael Kopech, Chris Getz made it definitive. As we heard early in the show, Kopech's moving to the bullpen. Have you heard more reason why the White Sox have decided to move Kopech to the bullpen after Dylan Cease has been traded away? And Ethan Katz kind of alluded to the fact that maybe he could be getting those save opportunities early in the season for the White Sox.
I mean, I was hearing that there was an exhaustion level with watching him try to, hit his head against the ceiling and starting for, the first couple starts. I think, if it wasn't going to be dramatically different, if it was going to continue to look like kind of the frustrating Kopech starts of the last 2 years, I think the phrase that stuck out to me in conversations was, we've seen this movie before. So I don't think it's necessarily a reaction to Cease beyond like, all right, we've got 2 weeks left. We just did this major thing. Here's what we're not going to do. In fact, let's get this guy rolling towards this better path sooner than later. Now, that said, I think you can pretty clear see how this would, especially with 2 years of service time left, especially with where you're going in terms of the team, this sets him up to be tradable more quickly and at this deadline, sooner than trying to convince the rest of the league that he's a viable starter. That would probably take some work to get some real asset. But like the stuff, especially the fastball and the spin that it's behind it, I think that's something you could sell somebody and it being useful, especially with because of his struggles, his R figures have remained pretty low. It's not like even if Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez tear the cover off the ball and look awesome or look like they've fully realized their ceiling at this break, you're probably looking at a trade where you're eating salary to get a prospect. I think if Kopech is really looking like as good as he did out of the bullpen even in 21, I think you're looking at a decent, it's not a haul or anything, but it's a year and a half of a high leverage reliever, and those are trades worth making, and this gets them close to that pretty quickly. And you worry one of the things that we've worried about with Kopech, which is agent efficiency, not being able to go deep, is changeup. Forget all those things. Forget that changeup ever existed. It's something you can kind of think about now if you're switching for a reliever. It was a lot of things to tackle with him to have him be a viable starter. And now that you're going with the stripped down package of assignments that have to be fulfilled in the next 2 weeks.
Jim, you were asked this during your radio segment at 6 over the score, and I'm always going to remember Dan Bernstein's reaction to where you think that this could be a good thing for Michael Kopech, a position to succeed. I'm with you, Jim. Dan made it very clear. He's very against moving Kopech into the bullpen. But as we saw in 2021 with the fastball slider combination, I thought after 2021, I was really excited to see him stretched out and become a starter because his stuff was so dynamic coming out of the bullpen. If he can get back to that version with the fastball and slider, the White Sox have a pretty good reliever now in their bullpen with Michael Kopech.
Yeah, I think basically the outcome you want is to be thinking that Kopech can do more. That's kind of how it strikes me, a little bit of Peter principle at play, to where when he's at his best at a reliever, it's why can't he go beyond 2 innings? Why isn't that fastball slider good enough on its own? Especially with just how, he can, you ride that fastball longer than most people can when it's when he's hitting his spots, that it's a pretty simple approach. Kind of like Carlos Rodon having only 2 pitches and he had a changeup, but it didn't really matter because he could throw a slider in a few different ways. Kopech's fastball had that same ability to baffle hitters multiple times through the lineup, even if they know it's coming. So that's, I think, the tension the White Sox have to live with, or just are choosing, is we might be leaving something on the table, but having seen what we've seen, I think there's some value with the White Sox, this new Getz administration, just telling fans that, we see it. We might not be able to do anything about it right now, but we know what you're watching and we're watching it too. And, we're trying to take small steps. I think that's what they're stressing with the defense. Our fundamentals were terrible and we're going to have guys know what to do with the ball when they get it. It's a very low bar, but at least it's something, they're expressing some kind of shared reality, I think, which helps. And now I think it's just an extension of it. This is a case of Kopech moving the bullpen. Yeah, he's better as a reliever. We'd love for him to prove us wrong, but I don't think there's gonna be time for him to prove them wrong. Same with trading Cease. It's we knew the risk of that. So we got a package that was good enough. So I think right now the strength of their position, at least in the front office, is they're just airing realities from the previous administration that only go so far. So that's why I think by the second half, it needs to be less about everything everybody before them did wrong, and then more about okay, what are you going to do about it? Besides Paul DeYoung.
Because you were asked about when could we see Colson Montgomery and Brian Ramos. I think the White Sox are going to play the 45-day game. with both of them. So that's late August that they could be called up, in which they don't accrue 45 days of service time. So they keep their rookie eligibility going to 2025. So they could be hunting for that draft pick that James has referred to in previous posts at SoxMachine.com and podcasts as well. But not the same, though, with the pitchers. And out of these 10 internal candidates that Ethan Katz is hinting at, realistically, James, I've got 6. Like, Eric Fetty's going to be in it. Mike Soroka's been pitching well this spring, even though he's finding like a new release. Chris Flexen. And this is now where I start to struggle. Is Jared Schuster throwing in spring?
Is he throwing?
He's not getting a lot of time. He's not getting a lot of game action.
Hey, he's 5th on the depth chart on the website, though. He's in the rotation, man. I think
all right, so let's throw him in there.
That have not gone great.
Yeah, great. So
you're both right.
And then Nastrini.
I think I'd put Nastrini in the opening day rotation with the fact that he's looked good and earned it meritocracy wise, and the way they've talked about it is like not being an absurd concept. Like looking back at the conversations I have, I feel like I got hints that like Kopech was moving to the bullpen and kind of soft pedaled it with just saying like, yeah, like they're not in love with going forward with this for a full season, and then it winds up he doesn't even make it to spring training. So if I'm taking the hints I've gotten there, then I think the stream would break camp in the rotation because like he's just flat out outperforming their other candidates. He's 24. I don't think he's quite level, and maybe like it's hard to do with starting pitching prospects in general, but like I don't think he's quite on the let's worry about 2030 control of him level just yet. And I think, as much as like the roster strength is this is a rebuilding team, I think some of their idea is that they don't want it to be basically pure development atmosphere, like one level above AAA, where you're just seeing guys who are prospects but are not functional, who are not helping the roster, and they're just getting a chance to like just fail over and over again, maybe throwing off, maybe overtaxing other relievers, by the way, and creating like this really non-competitive, non-meritocracy environment. I think that's what they looked at the 3 rebuild years as maybe a bit of a mistake of just like you didn't prepare this team for the idea that like, hey, if you struggle, hey, if you don't do this, like you're going to see your playing time affected, or you're going to see you're going to drop in on the depth chart in some way. I think they want to gear it towards an operated tie toward like a regular major league outfit where they're trying to maximize their wins at all times, and you have to earn your spot type of atmosphere. I think there's going to be like exceptions to that. I think there's you're probably going to see them do the general level service time games or the PPI games that you just talked about in some way, and obviously there's going to be things they're going to do to try to maximize their talent hoarding in some way, but I think you're not going to see, holding down like your best starter, or maybe some of the more just truly fan murdering things that you have to watch in the name of, well, he's got to get at bats, he's got to get development, even if it's just clearly not working.
Garrett Crochet has been very good this spring for the Chicago White Sox. It's 9 scoreless innings now, just allowed 7 hits over 4 appearances. He's made 1 start. He's got 12 strikeouts, no walks. So if you're going based on just spring training performance, Jim, maybe I have to eat some crow. I still don't think Garrett Crochet is a starting pitcher, and he's best suited out of the bullpen. Because again, the whole premise of can he take the ball every 5th day and give you 100+ innings in a season is still unknown. But if the White Sox are just going with an like internal starting rotation right now, if you're not confident Jared Schuster, I guess Garrett Crochet is in your starting 5 then?
Yeah, there is a path to do something I think that's kind of interesting here, given the way he's throwing and seems to be responding well to a set schedule. Like the one thing I wondered about, like if he does, break camp in the bullpen, like say this is a Dylan Cease is still here scenario to where like there are 5 starters, Crochet is going to be in the bullpen. They're going to try to line him up with maybe Kopech or Flexen or somebody to be like a fascinating counterpoint to maybe confuse the lineup a little bit. But still, like, given how weak the White Sox are. Like, you can't save 2 pitchers for one day and expect like the rest of the pitching staff to hold up. So like, you couldn't necessarily do that. But now that Cease is gone, now that they need starters, like, I'm not opposed, given how well Crochet has responded, to just like saying, you get the ball every 5th day. Go nuts. Like, we'll decide when enough is enough. But just like, you be you throw like 50 pitches, 60 pitches, and we'll see how it's looking. We'll see how your mechanics are holding up. We'll see what your release point's doing. We'll see like if your pitch mix is getting exposed like multiple times through. But like, obviously I don't think they're going to go from like, 40 pitches one game to 110 the next, but like, just kind of have a gauge of just like, okay, we're through 3 innings or we're through this pitch count. How's he looking? Can we push him one more? Are there lefties coming up to where like this, we can squeeze an extra batter or two, push him a little bit and see how he responds, when it comes to his throw day on the side. That's, I think, probably the best use of Crochet, because you don't get like into he has to start, he has to throw 5 innings every time. You also don't get into he didn't respond to a regular usage before. So this gives him a chance to actually like prove himself as somebody who might benefit from a 5-day habit, just without saddling him with like every 5-day expectations that starters normally have.
It's a baseball equivalent of like, we'll clean it up in post, but in this case, the post-production process is just 2 innings of Jake Woodford.
Or Steven Wilson or something like that. Like, we're gonna stretch him out a little bit.
And then finally, there is the external options, which James wrote on SoxMachine.com that the White Sox have kicked the tires on Michael Lorenzen. There's some rumors, so have the New York Yankees, as the Yankees are still trying to figure out what is going on with Garrett Cole. The Yankees have been told Marcus Stroman will not be ready for opening day. Things are not going well in the Bronx to start, or I should say wrap up as far as spring training. They're dealing with some injuries heading towards opening day. So a little uneven for the Yankees world right now. And it sounds like Michael Lorenzen's going to have some options. And then Bob Nightingale of USA Today tweeted that the Chicago White Sox are considering bringing Mike Clevinger back. And I'll make this clear from my perspective, and then I'll let you guys speak about it. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, from a baseball perspective, from a business perspective, like, what was that entire mutual option for? Only for you to come back? I mean, you already took $4 million from the White Sox, and what are you going to be getting? Like $8 million to pitch for the 2024 White Sox, and he hasn't pitched all spring training. So he's still not going to be ready for opening day. Like, no, I'm a no on bringing Mike Clevinger back. So Jim, I'll leave it to you as far as the external options. Like, one, do you take that rumor seriously from Bob Nightingale? Because it's Nightingale and it's the White Sox. And if the White Sox don't get Michael Lorenzen, is there anyone else out there that's still a free agent that you think the White Sox should pursue and try to help fill out a starting rotation?
You take it seriously because it's Nightingale. There are 2 modes of like Nightingale rumors. There's the one where he says something's going to happen. He's like, no way. And then it happens. And you're like, oh, well, so much for that. There are other ones where he is kind of, he says could, or, is the front runner. He hedges a little bit, like say Dayton Moore, like that did not happen, but it was softer than Chris Getz is going to be the next guy. And so there are some, when he qualifies a statement or when he doesn't say it's expected to happen or going to happen, just waiting for a certain day for it becoming official, then I think you can, ease up a little bit. I think the way I've described it before is like my friend in high school used to say, like, in the car, like, gentlemen, I'm about to fart and there's nothing you can do about it because it already happened. And then by the time like, that sentence is over, like, oh, great. And then the windows go down. And that's kind of how Nightingale breaks White Sox news. But this left a little bit of room to be like, almost like a trial balloon of like, let's see how people respond, and let that dictate just how long memories are. It feels like the White Sox, I'm sure they dodged a bullet. They took a bullet because that whole thing was awkward starting out, but like it stayed put, like it didn't get infected. I guess he he pitched okay, not well enough to be traded, but like didn't cause any additional headaches or embarrassment. And by the time it ended, like, that could have been worse. And so it feels like, having seen Aroldis Chapman be weird, there's always a little bit of a thing, like when guys are weird with, weird is just a very wide definition of weird, but just say like, criminals, borderline criminal, with women, like it tends to repeat itself if they've shown no contrition or like no, sense of like proportion or, introspection, which, I think Trevor Bauer's running into that problem right now. So like, I still don't trust him from purely from a selfish standpoint. It sucks hosting discussions about him. So that's kind of where I come from. Like, I don't like having the comments turn to crap every day, just when it comes to just people who are, have very real reasons why they don't want him in a White Sox uniform, like personal reasons why they don't want to, and other people who, there's a justifiable aspect of like, there were no charges. It's Major League Baseball, rewards the best of the best, make winning a priority. And just like, those are two things that will never agree. And the conversation goes round and around and insults get thrown, and I have to lock the comments. And so like, I don't want to do that. So I think for multiple reasons, like I don't want to see it happen, but I can always default to that one. If I don't feel like, getting into like, getting accused of being sanctimonious or high and mighty, just like, no, it sucks to have to monitor comments extra closely whenever Clevenger is involved, because otherwise we have a very nice community at Sox Machine. The conversations are valuable. In those cases, those conversations quickly become unvaluable because of just those tensions that will never resolve themselves because they are irresolvable.
Other free agents available other than Mike Clevenger and Mike Lorenzen, former Royals pitcher Zach Greinke. What are the odds, James, that Zach Greinke could join the Chicago White Sox if they cannot sign Michael Lorenzen?
I mean, I would think low, but he did just pitch with the Royals on purpose for like 2 years, so I don't know if this situation would faze him. Johnny Cueto's just out there. Yeah. We're not even talking about him.
Johnny Cueto's out there. Noah Syndergaard.
Like a horse, Johnny Cueto's out there. Yeah.
Clomping along.
Rich Hill?
Tender rate of 38. There's a couple of guys there. Like, at this point, like, is there anyone, Jake Odorizzi, I don't know if he's healthy. I think he was throwing for teams at one point. What the level, like, Rich Hill is 44, but he clicked great with Bannister in Boston. What level of guy could they sign right now where you wouldn't be like, oh, all right? Like, I think other than like Clevenger and the issues that he brings up, I think, or Bauer, God forbid, I think it's all like the same level of like, all right, give it a chance, type of situation with the depth that they're brought down to. It's interesting with like Lorenzen because on the purpose, he's like, it looks like, the steaming towards 100 losses White Sox or the New York Yankees. Which one do I pick? But something that he really wanted and was kind of an issue down the stretch with Philadelphia is to really get a chance to start. And if he goes to the Yankees, where he's kind of, I guess, a little bit, things pop up health wise where there's always a need for starters, but if he's just kind of keeping the seat warm for Garrett Cole, he might be in the same situation where maybe he gets swung out to the bullpen again, much to his chagrin. Whereas I think if he's coming to the White Sox, the one argument you can make, like, the innings will be here, buddy. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably a lot, if you're talking about Soroka, not that he had any choice in the matter, but guys like Soroka or guys like Fetty, like, the selling point that they've got to like basically everybody in camp is opportunity. And I think they can at least offer that to some of the fringe level starters who otherwise look around and feel like they probably have to fight for a rotation spot or accept the idea that they're going to bounce back into the bullpen and all that sort of stuff, where the Sox at least have that. I don't think it's going to get Blake Snell in the building, but it's something that I think is probably intriguing for, at this point, if you're a free agent starter, I think you've given up on some of the notions you had for how free agency is going to play out for you, and somebody just offering a kind of 1 year platform to, show your wares and hopefully take a better spin around the block would be enticing.
Well, I would say it does seem like Bannister being around would be like a point in the favor of just like, well, you get unlimited starts, kind of like unlimited soup and breadsticks, but like unlimited starts. And, Bannister has a history of like working with what you got. That would seem to be like, an attractive combination for guys who want like one more good contract, or like maybe do want to find that better landing spot, but also don't want 3 bad weeks to sink them. I like the idea of Greinke a lot, just because Greinke on a 105 loss White Sox team against like his bluntness against Grifol's trying to prop up any kind of like alternate reality where the White Sox have something to play for, I think could be just fascinating. Like, I would love to hear like Grifol talk about a Greinke start, and then Greinke talk about a Greinke start or a game, and then just go back and forth. But I think like he would become such a popular figure that's almost like the reason why Ozzie Guillen can't be a bench coach is because like everybody would want to talk to the bench coach over the manager, and be really hard to like establish a hierarchy. It might be the same thing with Greinke. Like everybody's going to go to him to get the quotes about like how this team really looks to a guy who's playing for him.
What I was going to mention is that Michael Lorenzen last year had a 1-year, $8.5 million base salary contract, but he received a $250,000 bonus for pitching more than 100, 125, 150, 175, 195, and 205 innings. I'm wondering aloud, and I'm just speculating here, if that is something that he would be interested in signing with the White Sox, and if the White Sox would be willing to have that same type of incentives for Lorenzen, that, yeah, if you pitch more than 100 innings at a 25 inning increment, we'll give you the same bonus and the same pay that you had last year with Detroit and Philadelphia to come pitch for the White Sox in 2024 for a season and either reestablish your market, or if you're really good in the first half, we'll trade you to a contending team like what happened to him last year.
It does remind me that the answer to your question of why do they go through the mutual option thing just for him to come back, it's because the mutual option was always a financial trick to defer a portion of his salary to the next fiscal year. So it never was a thing about like decision, whether we both like each other at the same time type of thing. It's just, let's not pay you $8 million all at once.
Ended up being a balloon payment teams didn't want to take on, though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see what the White Sox do here. I guess, James, are we expecting another pitcher to be added? I know Getz mentioned the non-roster invitees. We haven't talked about Brad Keller at all. The fact the White Sox signed him, that's whatever. I think that's a nothing burger. But is the expectation that they're going to bring somebody in before spring training ends?
It seemed like they were signing an NRI twice a week for a portion there. But yeah, I think that's a likely path. I think it's something he didn't dismiss today on record. And, you're hearing simmering of them, actively talking about it, around the league, that it sounds like maybe they won't get their target. Maybe they got other competitors to deal with, but it seems like they're definitely like, we need to add some innings, because clearly those conversations are happening. So I'd expect it to bear some sort of fruit, even if it's like, the type of fruit that Aldi has decided can't be on the shelves any longer and has started giving out in the alley, but it'll bear some.
Well, we'll see what the White Sox do over the weekend, but that will conclude this episode of the Sox Machine podcast, as now we move in a direction post Dylan Cease, as he now joins the San Diego Padres out in Korea, as the opening day for Major League Baseball is approaching. This weekend is also the Prospect Showcase, right, Jim? Yeah,
the spring breakout.
The spring breakout, that's right. That's what they're calling it. So we'll be covering that as well on SoxMachine.com. And if the White Sox do make any moves, of course, continue to go to SoxMachine.com and continue to help supporting us at Patreon.com/SoxMachine, where monthly plans just start at $5 to gain full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox. And thank you to many people who recently joined Patreon.com/SoxMachine with the recent trade news of Dylan Cease to San Diego. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also do videos, which you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh, and of course, follow James at JR Fegan. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
I'm Mark Chapman. Welcome to the Planet Premier League podcast. Each week, Cesc Fabregas, Nader Manua and myself talk all things Premier League.
As a player, you don't have time to talk. No. You don't have time to make a plan. You just need to deal with wave after wave after wave.
We watched Coach Carter and he said, afterwards, the game's just about doing this for your teammates. And I remember looking around halfway through the film and half the squad was asleep.
Planet Premier League. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.